Hello and welcome to Butter Movies. For a show with plenty of military drama, Lioness has been fairly slow-paced. Just as in episode 4, there's more screen time devoted to the planning and discussion around a mission than the actual execution. It's not until the final 10 minutes or so of Shatter the Moon that fans are finally able to see the rescue operation that's been talked about the whole time. Fans of military TV shows will find this boring, particularly since the need for the mission to be a night strike also means that the audience can't see anything for periods of time. Viewers have to rely on what they can hear, and the regular cuts back to Tucker's perspective. And just like in episode 4, Sheridan relies on a last-moment plot twist to get viewers coming back again. This time, it's the revelation of a suicide bomber who blows himself up to stop the team's assault on the smugglers, presumably killing quite a few people. It's so shocking that it feels almost too random. But it's indicative of the big problem in this episode, and Lioness Season 2 as a whole. The show spent the entire first half of its season planning to infiltrate the Lost Tigers cartel. Josie literally just gets in the door of her home in episode 5. With only 3 episodes left, how is Sheridan going to play out an entire operation in a way that satisfies viewers? Or is he not going to, and the story will pull the audience in another direction, which might be exciting but will make viewers feel like they didn't need to spend all that time watching Josie prepare for something that didn't happen? Episode 5 gets to the point Lioness needed to hit, but it's the performances by the actors, not the plot, that carries the hour. The satisfaction comes from watching what its 3 stars do and how they give their characters more color. Sheridan will have to step up the action if he wants to deliver an explosive finale, because right now the best action was back in episode 2. Lioness Season 2, episode 5, Shatter the Moon, belongs entirely to a character from season 1. The return of Laysla De Oliveira as Cruz Manuelos continues to pay dividends for the Paramount Plus show, as Cruz's presence overshadows almost everything else in the episode. And with just a few more left to, the series is finally getting to the mission that it talked about in the first place, but is it coming too late? Shatter the Moon is primarily about the characters reacting to the child trafficking that they saw at the end of Season 2, Episode 4, 500 Children. But a part of the episode is devoted to Captain Josie Carrillo making contact with her family and starting the operation she was hired for. It's Cruz's presence as a foil to both Josie and Joe that makes Episode 5 work, yet the clock is constantly ticking. Taylor Sheridan could have used the return of Cruz as simply a shock moment for Lioness, something to reel in the fans who watched Season 1. But from the moment that Joe and Cruz first reconnected in Episode 4, it was clear that Sheridan had actual plans for the character, and the audience watches Cruz become bigger than Joe in Episode 5. She's more interesting to watch and has almost as much to do story-wise as the team's fearless leader. And it's De Oliveira's performance that gives Shatter the Moon its emotion. The Lioness team reacts very strongly to seeing hundreds of children being held for trafficking, and the situation prompts Josie to have a full-blown meltdown, yelling at Joe to court-martial her before storming out of the room. This is where Cruz comes good, as she reels Josie back in by relating a little bit about her time in the Lioness program and the difficult choice she made in Season 1. The audience doesn't have to have seen Season 1 to connect with what she's saying. Sheridan establishes Cruz's angst in the dialogue and De Oliveira sells it. The dynamic that's building between Cruz and Josie is quickly more interesting than the one between Cruz and Joe, because while Cruz is just as tough on the new recruit, they have something in common. Shatter the Moon includes the long-awaited scene in which Josie makes contact with her family, or not her uncle, but her mother and father. It's the part audiences have been thinking about since the Lioness Season 2 premiere, and the reason it works is Cruz being there. Her calming Josie down before they arrive and her reactions to what gets said at the dinner table are memorable moments that also remind audiences that it isn't easy or even fun to be a lioness. From the season premiere, the character of Joe has been incredibly aggressive in knowing what she wants and expecting to get it, without much care for anyone else's situation or their feelings. The scenes involving Joe's children and her husband Neil have been the only ones to prove that Joe is capable of warmth and compassion. In Season 2, Episode 5, that changes because Joe is one of the people most affected by seeing the endangered children. Zoe Saldana has a great scene in which Joe, struggling with a few tears, calls back to CIA headquarters and argues that they should be allowed to rescue the kids. This prompts a brief, but intense argument with her boss. It's really nice to see the vulnerable side of Joe make its way into the military side of Lioness Season 2's narrative, because it gives Saldana more to do than yell at people and dish out orders, although she does her biggest amount of yelling at the beginning of the episode when Joe is enraged about what's just happened. But from a character standpoint, it makes her far more interesting. There have been times where she's been frustrating to watch, particularly in the premiere and in Season 2, Episode 3, Along Came a Spider. This is a show who has more to offer plot-wise. Joe's scenes with Cruz are especially fun because the two interact with one another as colleagues, no longer in a boss-employee relationship. It's Cruz who comes up with the idea of offering Josie's father a deal and gets Zoe on board with doing so, although based on Josie's reaction to the slurs he utters during his dinner table monologue, she may no longer think her father is worth saving. But that's Cruz's idea, and she has some good advice for both Josie and Joe. And Joe's willingness to listen to her is that more human side of the character. But how long will that last, especially since the rescue mission she advocated? When last we tuned into Taylor Sheridan's espionage thriller, Joe, on the heels of beginning her new Lioness training, came to realize that Captain Josie Carrillo was not at all forthcoming when she was first recruited to gain intel on Los Tigers, aka the Chihuahua and Coahuila cartel that kidnapped a U.S. congresswoman and likely has ties to both the Mexican government and China. What is a Lioness trainer to do if their undercover asset cannot be trusted to be loyal to her country? Related stories. Morgan Freeman Lioness. Morgan Freeman has acted in his fair share of White House drama. Here, he explains why Lioness is different. Lioness Season 2 Josie Genesis Rodriguez. New Lioness roars, Genesis Rodriguez spills secrets behind Josie's fiery intro and her hard yes video. That is the dilemma now facing Joe, Zoe Saldana, and her superiors, as seen in Twine's exclusive sneak peek from this Sunday's episode. When last we tuned into Taylor Sheridan's espionage thriller, Joe, on the heels of beginning her new Lioness training, came to realize that Captain Josie Carrillo was not at all forthcoming when she was first recruited to gain intel on Los Tigers, aka the Chihuahua and Coahuila cartel that kidnapped a U.S. congresswoman and likely has ties to both the Mexican government and China. For one, Josie is quite aware of her immigration lawyer father's true involvement with his brother's cartel. Also, she does speak Spanish, despite originally claiming otherwise. Congratulations, Joe. You recruited a mole, CIA officer Kyle remarked after Josie revealed herself. Joe herself was not at all pleased, either. Your father is a lawyer? You don't speak Spanish? You think we're f***ing amateurs, she barked at Josie. We do this for a living. Josie denied signing on as Lioness to secretly protect her family, and reiterated that she loves her country. But do you love it enough to put your father in prison, asked Joe. To destroy everyone she loves, and everything they built? In the sneak peek above, from Season 2's 4th episode, 500 children, Brian, Michael Kelly, and Caitlin, Nicole Kidman, tasked Joe with assigning a shadow to Captain Carrillo to take immediate and deadly action. Joe doesn't trust the new Lioness. For all her time and experience behind the intelligence curtain, she still insists on running her operation in good faith. For the love of country, warts and all. But as resident queen of pragmatic CIA gallism Caitlin Meade reminds her, Joe shouldn't trust any of them. Trust, in other words, is not a luxury available to anyone who serves the agency. Spycraft is the liecraft, and Joe suspects Josephina Carrillo's story isn't her whole story. The trick is figuring out what to do with the truth once you extract it. This week, Captain Carrillo arrives at Fort Bliss, the temporary rough-and-tumble home of the Lioness crew, and gets a condensed, but no less nightmarish intro course in militant espionage, while Joe gets another quick fix of Full House-style domestic play, and Caitlin greases some wheels of power in Washington. The button gets pushed on Josephina's cover, with news of her discharge spread over cable news. Back at the Saucy Exposition meeting room, our bigwig Greek chorus of Mullins, Mason, and Holler express concern over the convenience of their new assets cover story and point out the historical stickiness of CIA operations moving drugs across the border. A quick nudge from Caitlin gets the real concern out of them, though public outrage over the congresswoman's abduction isn't holding, and the press is resisting a push for greater awareness. The response is divided on party lines, and as the show has reminded us at least twice every episode so far, there's an election looming. The president is polling at 40% and they need more support from their side of the aisle to move on their current plan, as if we needed to be reminded of our real-life election. We'll see how that plot point affects the enjoyment of the show come next week. Yikes! Josephina is flown into Fort Bliss and picked up by Bobby, Jill Wagner. Right away, she is shown that working with the CIA is not going to be like her time in the army. Things get no better when she meets the rest of the team, who basically ignore her. She asks what they have to do to get past the awkwardness. But the team says nothing, they don't want to know anything about her aside from her cover, and she doesn't need to know anything about them. The next morning Josephina gets a rude awakening to the team's living arrangements as they all share a single latrine. She's apparently shy about showing herself naked, but Tucker, LaMonica Garrett, tells her where she can get some privacy. She doesn't have much time for that though, as Kyle, Thad Luckinbill, arrives and tells her he wants to see what she's made of. He has her observe the team run a drill where he says they rely on S***T hits the fan tactics. One watch and then it's her turn. But first, she gets a lesson in shooting, with her taking target practice as everyone else makes noise and yells at her, noting there is no such thing as a peaceful gunfight. She then does the house drill, complete with loud noises and strobe lights to distract her. She hesitates in certain situations but ultimately completes the drill as instructed. Joe arrives and asks Kyle how Josephina is doing. He says she doesn't know anything, but she learns quickly, follows directions, and does what she's told without asking too many questions. A good place to start. Next, Joe wants to have her run through the simulator. Pushing for the truth. Wearing a VR headset, Josephina is put through a simulated situation where she has to take out a number of enemies on a Mexican street. She comes upon a man holding a young woman hostage. She yells at the man, a simulation, mind you, to let the woman go, but instead, the man shoots at Josephina, ending the simulation. Joe scolds her for her performance, telling her they're not a hostage rescue team, they're a kill team, eliminating their target is their only mission and any obstacle to that must be overcome. Josephina asks how Joe would suggest she overcome a 16-year-old girl with a gun to her head. Shoot the girl yourself and then the enemy, Joe answers. Josephina says that's murder, but Joe corrects her, it's survival. Joe needs more time to train Josephina, but Kyle points out that they don't have it, she has to be embedded soon. It's time for Joe to get tough with her. So Byron and Caitlin split duties convincing the two senators holding up the votes. Caitlin enlists the help of her Illuminati financial investor husband Errol, Martin Donovan, to opine on the economic consequences of another high-profile target on U.S. soil over dinner with Senator Fuller, while she lets it slip that the abduction was a probe instigated by Chinese intelligence. With the boogeyman sufficiently incepted through hushed tones, the senator seems interested in letting Caitlin and her team take care of it all quietly, somehow stopping another 9/11 from happening while preventing a devastating market collapse. I don't know, that's the argument Caitlin and Errol make between bites of what I'm sure is insanely expensive, mediocre as, well-done steak. And I guess it's enough to get the Senate on board and procure a black fund for the mission. Only 3 episodes in, and Joe's home life pattern is already getting a bit redundant. Pull up to the driveway with a melancholy mix of weariness and relief, get triggered into perceiving a phantom threat, draw a gun, and almost shoot a family member. This time, though, she catches Dr. Neil enjoying a quiet afternoon bath while the girls are away. I think we can officially hand the devoted and devastatingly hot TV house partner championship belt, husband, wife, or otherwise, to Dave Annable, who's so goddamn handsome as to make these otherwise hilarious sitcom-y family intrigue worth sitting through. The whole "you should be happy your parents love each other" scene after Kate walks into direct view of her parents' parts mid-smash had me in tears. Even when they stick him with the task of arguing with his daughters about their friend being non-binary over breakfast, complete with a groan-worthy appeal to the free exchange of ideas, cribbed from whatever episode of the Joe Rogan podcast he heard that morning. Just when I thought my sexual orientation was shifting from Zoe Saldana verbally destroys someone to Dave Annabelle makes eggs. Anyway, on her way out the door, Joe backs him up with a little CIA mom twist. What your father means is ideas are meant to be challenged. He has the right to disagree with you, and you have the right to disagree with him. There are nations where that right doesn't exist, and those are the places you don't want to visit. Joe goes to those places so they don't have to, etc., etc. The inner conflict between her patriotism and detached realism seeps through the things she tells her family as justification for her absence. Like Joe, the Lioness series continues to run on the mythical boomer centrists' vague distrust in our institutions undercut by a resounding belief in the fractured American white hat mythos. It also continues to exhibit the type of uncanny, lizard-brainy images of combat and violence to erupt from Hollywood's deep well of dissonant, yoked espionage dramas. Josephina's welcome to Fort Bliss is characteristically cold and all the more abrasive by the lack of privacy in the open bunk, co-ed showers, and open latrine. I can tolerate this in Pakistan, I can't do this shit in Texas, shouts Bobby, storming out of the shower after 2 cups runs in to take a huge emergency dump, the whole mad scene recalling the co-ed showers of our future fascist space military in Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers. Josephina suggests they break the ice and get to know each other at dinner, but the Lioness crew isn't interested in getting to know their lioness this time around, not beyond her cover. We don't got time to learn both, says Tucker. This party starts at dawn, where Josephina shows her natural aptitude for the job, owning a standing target at the firing range and demonstrating a rapid-fire mastery of boots-on-the-ground directives in the noise torture obstacle course or whatever. Things get shakier, though, when Joe puts her through a goofer-looking VR exercise. Josephina yells, "Let her go," at a fake assailant holding a fake hostage with all the fervor of a boomer shrieking in terror at a VR roller coaster. This makes it pretty funny when Joe says, "What are you, a cop? Let her go?" The point is that this is a kill team and a kill team only. To kill is to survive. And now, Josephina's survival will require her to destroy her family. Here's where Joe takes Caitlin's cue from the top of the episode. She can't trust Josephina, but she can use that distrust to identify pressure points, recruit not by way of camaraderie, but by fear. Josephina told them a heavy stack of lies, that she didn't know her father and uncle's business and didn't speak Spanish, enough to put her away as a mole with a phone call to the military police. If she lied to protect her family, how are they supposed to believe she'll destroy them for love of country? Josephina claims she broke away from them a long time ago because she didn't want to know or have anything to do with the cartel. She seems to be telling the truth on that count, but the truth doesn't matter when she's already been cast in the central role of this operation. Under duress, she plays her part and makes the introductory call to her father. All in a day's work when you're in what Caitlin Mead calls the sovereignty of our nation business. She tells Josephina the next part of her mission is going to have her go home to her parents. When Josephina argues she doesn't have a close relationship with her family, Joe rips into her on that. She doesn't believe she's oblivious to her father's cartel connections and wants to know what else Josephina failed to tell her. Kyle and the rest of the team come over to add to the intimidation factor. When they speak Spanish to her, Josephina breaks and reveals she can indeed speak Spanish. They now claim Josephina is a mole and will have military police take her. Josephina pleads her case, saying she stayed away from her family because she didn't want to know their business. But Joe is confident she does know about it and that she could just be protecting her family. Josephina says she joined the Lioness program because she loves her country. Enough to put her father and other members of her family in jail, Joe asks. Joe gives Josephina one chance, putting her phone in front of her. Through tears, Josephina picks up the phone and calls her dad.